Ethan Carter stood at the edge of the observation deck, staring out at the strange new world below. The planet, named Zoreth 7, glowed faintly under its twin suns. Its surface was a mix of shimmering oceans and jagged mountains, dotted with clusters of towering structures that looked almost like crystal growing from the ground. This was the home of the Velari, an alien species humanity had only recently discovered. The Velari were unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. They were tall, with smooth, reflective skin that seemed to change colors depending on the light. Their eyes were large and luminous, glowing softly in shades of blue and green. But what fascinated Ethan most was their society. From everything he could gather, the Velari were ruled entirely by women. Males existed, but they stayed in the background, rarely speaking or making decisions. It was a matriarchy, something Earth's historians had studied in ancient human cultures, but never seen on such a grand scale. Ethan was part of a small team sent to establish contact with the Velari. Humanity wanted to learn more about these aliens, to understand their technology and perhaps even form an alliance. Captain Laura Hayes, the mission leader, kept reminding everyone to stay cautious. "We don't know enough about them yet," she would say during briefings. "Stick to the plan, follow protocol, and don't do anything reckless." But Ethan wasn't good at following rules. He had always been curious, sometimes too curious for his own good. As a linguist, his job was to study the Velari's language and find ways to communicate. So far, he had spent hours listening to recordings of their speech, which sounded like a mix of musical notes and soft whispers. He found it beautiful, almost hypnotic. Every time he heard it, he felt a pull, a need to understand more. The rest of the crew didn't share his enthusiasm. Most of them were nervous around the Velari. Lieutenant Ryan Blake, a stern man who preferred action over words, often muttered about how unpredictable the aliens were. "They're hiding something," he'd say. "You mark my words, Carter. One wrong move, and they'll turn on us." Ethan tried not to let the negativity bother him. Instead, he focused on the task at hand. For days, he watched holographic transmissions of the Velari going about their daily lives. They moved with grace, their long limbs flowing like water. At the center of every gathering was Kyra, the leader of the Velari. She was taller than the others, her silver hair cascading down her back like a waterfall. Her voice carried authority, yet there was a calmness about her that made Ethan feel safe, even though she was an alien. One evening, after another uneventful day of observation, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to do more. Studying the Velari from afar wasn't enough. He needed to meet them face to face. The idea came to him suddenly, like a spark igniting in his mind. Without telling anyone, he slipped away from the main base and boarded a small shuttle. His heart raced as he punched in the coordinates for the nearest Velari settlement. When he landed, the air outside was cool and smelled faintly of metal. Ethan stepped out cautiously, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. Within moments, a group of Velari females surrounded him. Their glowing eyes scanned him curiously, and for a moment, Ethan thought they might attack. Then Kyra appeared, stepping forward with quiet confidence. Ethan swallowed hard and spoke the few words he had learned in their language. "I come in peace." Kyra tilted her head, studying him closely. After what felt like an eternity, she nodded slightly. Ethan exhaled, realizing he had taken the first step into unknown territory. Little did he know, this decision would change everything, for better or worse. Ethan stood frozen as Kyra studied him, her glowing eyes piercing through him like she could see every thought in his mind. The other Velari females remained silent, their reflective skin shimmering faintly in the dim light. Ethan felt small, almost insignificant, but he forced himself to stay calm. He repeated the few words he had practiced. "I come, in peace." Kyra tilted her head again, then gestured for him to follow. Without hesitation, Ethan obeyed, knowing this might be his only chance to prove he meant no harm. As they walked toward the settlement, Ethan noticed how quiet everything was. There were no loud machines or bustling crowds, just a serene stillness that seemed to wrap around him like a blanket. The Valari village was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. The crystalline structures sparkled under the twin suns, casting rainbows across the ground. Inside one of the larger buildings, Kyra motioned for Ethan to sit on a smooth, curved bench. She said something in her melodic language, and another female brought over a tray with strange fruits and a glass of liquid that shimmered like mercury. Ethan hesitated but took a small sip. It tasted sweet, like honey mixed with something floral. For hours, Ethan tried to communicate using hand gestures and broken phrases in the Valari language. Kyra listened intently, her expression unreadable. Occasionally, she would respond with a word or two, her voice soft yet commanding. Though progress was slow, Ethan sensed that Kyra was intrigued by his presence. She didn't seem afraid of him, which gave him hope. Meanwhile, back at the human base, Captain Laura Hayes was growing increasingly anxious. Ethan's sudden disappearance hadn't gone unnoticed. Lieutenant Ryan Blake stormed into the command center, slamming his fist on the table. "He's gone rogue," Blake shouted. "What if the Valari see this as an act of aggression? We can't trust them." Hayes rubbed her temples, trying to stay composed. "We don't know what Ethan is doing down there," she replied firmly. "But we need to give him time. If we rush in, we risk making things worse." Blake wasn't convinced. Time. For all we know, he's already blown our chances of peaceful contact. What if they decide to attack us? Hayes knew Blake had a point, but she also understood Ethan's passion. She had read his reports, seen how dedicated he was to learning about the Valari. Still, protocol was clear. Unauthorized contact with aliens was forbidden. Reluctantly, she ordered a team to prepare for retrieval, just in case. Back on the surface, Ethan continued his cautious interactions with Kyra. Over the next few days, he learned more about their customs. Meals were shared communally, and everyone contributed to the well-being of the group. Ethan noticed how the males stayed in the background, working silently while the females led discussions and made decisions. It was fascinating but also unsettling. On Earth, men and women worked together as equals. But here, the roles were sharply divided. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Kyra approached Ethan. She held out a small object, a delicate crystal pendant hanging from a thin chain. Ethan hesitated before taking it, unsure of its meaning. Kyra touched her chest, then pointed to him, saying a single word, "Trust." Ethan nodded slowly, slipping the pendant around his neck. He realized then that Kyra saw him not as a threat, but as someone willing to learn. In return, he wanted to show her that humans weren't so different from the Valari. They valued connection, understanding, and cooperation. But even as Ethan grew closer to Kyra, he couldn't ignore the tension building above. Every night, he glanced up at the stars, knowing the human base was watching. Sooner or later, they would demand answers, and Ethan wasn't sure he was ready to face them. Ethan's days among the Valari passed quickly, each one filled with new discoveries. He spent hours observing their daily routines, learning how they lived in harmony with their environment. The Valari didn't rely on noisy machines or sprawling factories like humans did. Instead, they used natural resources carefully, crafting tools and structures from materials found in their surroundings. Ethan marveled at their efficiency and respect for the planet. Kyra became his guide, introducing him to rituals and traditions that were sacred to her people. One morning, she took him to a clearing surrounded by tall, glowing trees. The air was thick with a sweet scent, and soft music seemed to drift through the breeze. Kyra explained, it was a ceremony to honor the spirits of the land, a way to give thanks for the gifts Zoreth 7 provided. Ethan watched as the Valari females danced gracefully, their movements flowing like water. He felt out of place, but honored to witness something so intimate. Despite these moments of connection, Ethan couldn't ignore the darker side of Valari society. The males rarely spoke, and always kept their distance, working in silence while the females led discussions and made decisions. Ethan tried to ask Kara about this, using simple phrases in her language. "Why do men stay quiet?" he asked hesitantly. Kara paused, her expression unreadable. After a moment, she replied, "Balance." She pointed to the sky, then to the ground, mimicking the motion of scales. Ethan wasn't sure what she meant, but he sensed it was a complicated topic. When he pressed further, Kara shook her head firmly, signaling that the conversation was over. Back at the human base, tensions were rising. Captain Laura Hayes had sent multiple messages to Ethan via communicator, demanding he return immediately. Each time, Ethan ignored them, knowing he couldn't leave yet. He was making progress, real progress, and he believed abandoning the Valari now would ruin everything. Lieutenant Ryan Blake grew more frustrated with each passing day. "He's gone too far," Blake argued during a heated meeting. "We can't let one man risk the entire mission. If the Valari see us as weak because of him, we'll lose any chance of forming an alliance." Hayes sighed, torn between duty and understanding. She knew Blake was right, but she also trusted Ethan's instincts. Still, orders were orders. "Prepare a shuttle," she finally said. "If Ethan doesn't come back voluntarily, we'll have to bring him in ourselves." When the retrieval team landed near the Valari settlement, chaos erupted. The Valari reacted defensively, surrounding the humans with weapons drawn. Ethan rushed to the scene, his heart pounding. "Stop," he shouted in both English and broken Valari. "They're not here to fight." Kyra stepped forward, her eyes blazing with anger. She spoke sharply to Ethan, her tone colder than he'd ever heard. "You brought danger," she said, pointing at the humans. "Why?" Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "I didn't mean to," he replied honestly. "They're worried about me. They don't understand." For a moment, it seemed like the situation might spiral out of control. But then Kyra raised a hand, silencing her people. She turned to Ethan, her gaze piercing. "Leave now," she ordered, "or there will be consequences." Ethan hesitated, torn between two worlds. He looked at the Valari, who had welcomed him despite their differences, and then at the humans, who represented everything he had known his whole life. Finally, he nodded. "I'll go," he said quietly. "But please, trust me when I say I only wanted to help." As Ethan walked away with the retrieval team, he glanced back at Kyra. Her expression was unreadable, but he thought he saw a flicker of sadness in her eyes. It hurt to leave, but he knew it was the right thing to do, for now. As the shuttle lifted off the ground, Ethan clutched the crystal pendant Kyra had given him, vowing silently to find a way to bridge the gap between their worlds. Ethan sat in the shuttle as it soared back toward the orbital station, his mind racing. The crystal pendant around his neck felt heavy, a constant reminder of Kyra and the bond they had started to form. He replayed the events in his mind, the tension, the fear in the Valari's eyes, and Kyra's sharp words telling him to leave. It hurt, but he understood why she had reacted that way. To her, his actions might have seemed like betrayal. When the shuttle docked, Ethan was met by Captain Laura Hayes and Lieutenant Ryan Blake. Blake's expression was hard, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. Hayes looked relieved, but also frustrated. "What were you thinking?" she asked sharply. "You put the entire mission at risk." Ethan didn't argue. He knew he had broken protocol, but he also believed he had done the right thing. "I was trying to build trust," he said quietly. "The Valari aren't our enemies. They're just different. If we don't take the time to understand them, how can we ever hope to work together?" Blake snorted. "Different? You call that different? They pointed weapons at us. If we hadn't backed off, who knows what would have happened?" Hayes held up a hand to silence Blake. She studied Ethan carefully, noticing the exhaustion in his eyes and the weight of the pendant around his neck. "Did you learn anything useful while you were down there?" she asked, her tone softer now. Ethan nodded. "Yes, their society is built on balance and respect for nature. They value harmony above everything else. But he hesitated, unsure how much to share about the Valeri's treatment of males. Finally, he decided to keep it simple. Their ways are very different from ours. We can't expect them to act like us or think like us. If we want peace, we need to meet them halfway. Hayes sighed, rubbing her temples. She wanted to trust Ethan, but the stakes were high. Earth's leaders were already questioning the mission, and any misstep could lead to disaster. "All right," she said finally. "We'll give you one more chance to make this work. But if things go south again, we're pulling out. No arguments." Over the next few days, Ethan worked tirelessly to repair the damage. He sent messages to Kira through holographic transmissions, explaining that the humans hadn't meant to cause trouble. Slowly, Kira began to respond, her replies cautious but not unfriendly. Ethan sensed that she still trusted him, even if others among the Valeri did not. During this time, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the Valeri's rituals and traditions. He remembered the ceremony he had witnessed, the way the females danced gracefully under the glowing trees. There was a beauty in their culture that he admired deeply. He also thought about the males, who remained silent and distant. It troubled him, but he knew it wasn't his place to judge. Every society had its complexities, and the Valeri were no exception. One evening, as Ethan reviewed his notes, Kira appeared on the holographic screen. Her expression was calm, but there was a hint of curiosity in her glowing eyes. "Why do you care so much?" she asked, her voice soft but firm. Ethan paused, surprised by the question. "Because I believe we can help each other," he replied honestly. "Humans and Valeri may be different, but we both want the same things: safety, understanding, and a better future." Kira studied him for a long moment before nodding slightly. "Perhaps," she said, "but trust must be earned." Encouraged by her willingness to listen, Ethan proposed a new idea: a meeting between human and Valeri leaders to discuss mutual goals. Kira agreed to consider it, though she warned that many of her people were still wary of humans. Ethan understood, knowing that change wouldn't happen overnight. As the days passed, Ethan threw himself into preparing for the meeting. He worked with Hayes and the rest of the crew to create presentations showing Earth's advancements in technology and medicine, hoping to demonstrate humanity's potential as allies. At the same time, he continued reaching out to Kira, sharing stories of Earth's diverse cultures and landscapes. Slowly, a fragile sense of hope began to grow. Ethan knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he believed that with patience and effort, humans and Valeri could find common ground. For the first time since arriving on Zoreth 7, he felt like he was truly making a difference, not just for himself, but for both species. The day of the meeting arrived, and Ethan felt a mix of excitement and dread. The humans had prepared carefully, gathering images, videos, and data to present to the Valeri. Captain Laura Hayes gave a final briefing before they left for the surface. "Remember," she said firmly, "this is about building trust, not showing off. We need to prove we're here to cooperate, not to dominate." Ethan nodded, clutching a small device that contained Earth's message of peace. He knew this meeting could either mend the fragile bond between humans and Valeri or break it completely. As the shuttle descended toward the planet, he stared out the window at the shimmering landscape below. His heart raced as he thought about Kira and how much depended on her support. When they landed, a group of Valeri females was waiting, their glowing eyes watching silently. Kira stepped forward, her presence calm but commanding. She exchanged a few words with Ethan in her language, her tone neutral. "Are you ready?" she asked finally. "Yes," Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the nerves twisting in his stomach. Together, they walked toward the meeting area, a large open space surrounded by crystalline structures that sparkled in the sunlight. The meeting began with formal introductions. Hayes spoke first, using simple phrases in the Valeri language that Ethan had taught her. She explained humanity's desire for peace and cooperation, emphasizing shared goals like protecting the environment and advancing technology for the greater good. The Valeri listened intently, their expressions unreadable. Next, Ethan presented Earth's message. He showed holographic images of Earth's oceans, forests, and cities, explaining how humans lived and worked together. He highlighted moments of unity, like international efforts to combat climate change and explore space. The Velari seemed intrigued, especially when he described Earth's diversity, how people from different cultures came together to solve problems. But not everyone was convinced. One of the elder Velari females stood up, her voice sharp and clear. "You speak of unity," she said through Ethan's translation, "but your actions show fear. Your weapons, your ships, they are built for war. How can we trust you?" The room fell silent. Ethan glanced at Hayes, who looked uneasy. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. "It's true," he admitted. "Humans have made mistakes. We've fought wars and damaged our planet. But we've also learned from those mistakes. That's why we're here, to learn from you and find a better way forward." Kyra watched him closely, her expression thoughtful. After a long pause, she addressed the elders. "He speaks honestly," she said. "Perhaps we can teach each other." The discussion continued for hours, with both sides asking questions and sharing ideas. Slowly, the tension in the room eased. Ethan noticed small signs of progress. A nod here, a smile there. By the end of the meeting, the Velari agreed to consider further talks, though they remained cautious. As the humans prepared to leave, Kyra approached Ethan. She handed him a small object, a smooth stone etched with intricate patterns. "A symbol of hope," she said softly, "for both our peoples." Ethan accepted the gift, his throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," he whispered. As the shuttle lifted off, he held the stone tightly, feeling a sense of accomplishment mixed with uncertainty. The road ahead would still be difficult, but for the first time, he truly believed that peace was possible. Back on the orbital station, Hayes congratulated the team, though her tone was cautious. "Good work today," she said, "but don't get too comfortable. This is just the beginning." Ethan nodded, knowing she was right. He looked at the stone in his hand, then at the crystal pendant around his neck. These tokens represented two worlds coming together, however slowly. And for now, that was enough. Weeks passed after the meeting, and Ethan threw himself into strengthening the fragile bond between humans and Velari. He worked tirelessly, sending messages to Kira and organizing follow-up discussions. Slowly, trust began to grow. The Velari started sharing bits of their knowledge, how they harnessed energy from Zorath 7's natural resources, and how they maintained harmony with their environment. In return, the humans offered insights into medicine, engineering, and sustainable practices. But not everyone was pleased with the progress. Back on Earth, news of Ethan's efforts reached government officials, who were skeptical of his approach. They saw the Velari as unpredictable and feared that humanity was exposing itself to unnecessary risks. Orders came down from Earth. Ethan was to return immediately, and all contact with the Velari was to be suspended until further notice. When Captain Laura Hayes delivered the message, Ethan felt a wave of frustration. "We're just starting to make headway," he argued. "If we stop now, everything we've worked for could fall apart." Hayes looked at him with sympathy but shook her head. "I agree with you, Ethan, but these aren't my orders. If we defy them, it could mean the end of the mission altogether." Ethan knew she was right, but the thought of leaving Kyra and the Velari behind filled him with guilt. He had promised to help, to build a bridge between their worlds. How could he walk away now? The next day, Ethan met with Kyra one last time before his forced departure. She listened quietly as he explained the situation, her glowing eyes reflecting sadness. "Your people don't trust us," she said finally. "It's not that," Ethan replied quickly. "They're afraid, and fear makes people act irrationally. But I believe in what we've started. I believe we can find a way forward, together." Kyra studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Perhaps," she said softly. "But trust must be earned by both sides." Before leaving, Ethan gave Kira a small locket containing a recording of Earth's sounds, waves crashing against the shore, birds chirping in the morning, and wind rustling through trees. "This is a piece of my world," he said. "A reminder that even though we're different, there's beauty in both our worlds." Kira accepted the gift, her expression softening. "And this," she said, handing him a small crystal vial filled with shimmering liquid, "is a piece of mine. May it guide you when the path seems unclear." As Ethan boarded the shuttle back to the orbital station, he felt a deep ache in his chest. Leaving Kira and the Velari behind felt like saying goodbye to a part of himself. But he also knew this wasn't the end. It couldn't be. He had planted a seed of understanding, and he vowed to nurture it no matter what. Back on the station, tensions ran high. Lieutenant Ryan Blake criticized Ethan openly, accusing him of putting personal feelings above the mission's goals. "You got too close," Blake snapped during a heated argument. "You let emotions cloud your judgment." Ethan didn't respond. He knew Blake would never understand the connection he had formed with the Velari. Instead, he focused on drafting reports for Earth's leaders, highlighting the potential benefits of continued cooperation. He included detailed observations about the Velari's culture, their advanced technology, and their commitment to living in balance with nature. To his surprise, Hayes stood by him. "Ethan's actions may have been risky," she told the crew during a meeting, "but they've opened doors we didn't think possible. We owe it to ourselves, and to the Velari, to see this through." Though Ethan appreciated Hayes' support, he knew the fight wasn't over. Earth's leaders remained hesitant, and the future of human-Velari relations hung in the balance. Still, Ethan refused to give up hope. Every night, he held the crystal vial Kira had given him, letting its faint glow remind him of the promise they had made, to keep trying, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. Years passed, and Ethan Carter became a legend. His name was spoken with admiration among both humans and Velari. Though he never returned to Zoreth 7, his efforts had laid the foundation for a lasting alliance between the two species. The fragile bond he had nurtured grew stronger over time, built on mutual respect and understanding. On Earth, Ethan dedicated his life to teaching others about the importance of interstellar diplomacy. He traveled from city to city, sharing stories of the Velari and urging humanity to approach alien encounters with empathy and humility. His lectures were filled with vivid descriptions of Kira's calm strength, the shimmering beauty of Zoreth 7, and the lessons he had learned about balance and cooperation. "We're not so different from them," he would say. "Fear divides us, but curiosity and trust can bring us together." The Velari, too, remembered Ethan fondly. Kira often spoke of him during council meetings, reminding her people of the human who had dared to bridge the gap between their worlds. The locket he had given her remained one of her most treasured possessions. On quiet nights, she would listen to its recordings, the sound of Earth's oceans and winds, and feel a sense of connection to a distant planet she had never seen. Decades later, when humanity finally established formal relations with the Velari, it was Ethan's framework that guided the negotiations. His reports, once dismissed by skeptical leaders, became the blueprint for peaceful coexistence. Trade agreements were signed, cultural exchanges began, and joint projects aimed at preserving Zoreth 7's environment brought humans and Velari closer than ever before. Ethan himself grew old, his hair turning gray and his steps slowing with age. But his spirit remained as passionate as ever. Even in his final years, he continued to advocate for unity across the stars. His last public speech was delivered at a global conference celebrating 50 years of human-Velari cooperation. Standing on stage, frail but resolute, he looked out at the crowd and smiled. "When I first met the Velari," he said, "I didn't know if they would accept me, or if I could truly understand them. But I took a chance, and that changed everything." Never underestimate the power of reaching out, even when the odds seem impossible. After Ethan's death, his legacy lived on. Statues were erected in his honor, and schools taught his story as an example of courage and perseverance. Among the Velari, Kyra ensured that future generations knew of the human who had risked everything to connect with them. She kept the locket close until her final days, passing it down to her successor as a symbol of hope. Far above Zoreth 7, the crystal vial Ethan had carried with him throughout his life found its way into a museum on Earth. It sat in a glass case, glowing faintly under soft lights, accompanied by a plaque that read, Asterisk, a gift from Kyra of the Velari to Ethan Carter, a reminder that even in the vastness of space, bridges can be built. Asterisk. For centuries to come, humans and Velari worked side by side, exploring the universe and learning from one another. Their partnership proved that differences didn't have to divide. They could unite. And though Ethan and Kyra never saw each other again, their bond endured, inspiring countless others to reach across the stars and find common ground. In the end, Ethan's story was more than just a tale of one man's bravery. It was a testament to the power of trust, curiosity, and the unshakable belief that no matter how far apart two worlds might seem, there will always be those willing to take the first step toward connection.